The American Revolutionary War did more than secure independence for the 13 colonies. It was also a global conflict, with roots in broader imperial rivalries that stretched across Europe, the Caribbean, Africa, and Asia. The fighting in America was only one part of a much larger contest, a clash of empires that would redefine the balance of power in the late 17th century. Victory in the 7 Years' War made Britain the dominant global power, but at a heavy cost. Its national debt nearly doubled, and the government in London faced enormous financial pressures. To ease this burden, Parliament looked across the Atlantic to its colonies. For years, the American colonists had enjoyed relative autonomy and light taxation, while benefiting from the protection of the mighty British Navy. Now, with the empire deep in debt, the ministry insisted that the colonies contribute more directly to imperial expenses. The British government imposed direct taxes on the American colonies for the first time, such as the Stamp Act of 1765. To ministers in London, these measures seemed logical. To the colonists, however, they were an intolerable violation of rights. Many Americans argued that as British subjects, they were entitled to the principle of no taxation without representation. They had no seats in the British Parliament and therefore no say in laws that reached across the ocean to control their lives. This sense of injustice ignited protests, boycotts, and a rising tide of revolutionary sentiment. When war finally broke out, the colonists faced staggering odds. Britain was the most powerful nation in the world, boasting a professional army, a vast navy, and the wealth of an empire. The Americans, by contrast, were poorly equipped, divided among themselves, and uncertain of their future. Yet, under the leadership of George Washington, they began to transform. Washington's immediate focus was on establishing procedures, instilling discipline, and turning the disparate militia regiments into an effective fighting force. One of Washington's greatest challenges was the lack of heavy artillery. Without cannons, his army could not hope to match the firepower of British fortifications. A daring winter campaign was undertaken to transport artillery from the captured Fort Ticonderoga, a feat of logistical brilliance carried out over frozen rivers and snow-covered mountains. With the arrival of artillery, Washington devised a bold plan to break the stalemate at Boston. Faced with an untenable position, General Howe was forced to make a humiliating decision. On March 17, 1776, the British evacuated Boston. It was a great victory, achieved not by a bloody battle, but by strategy, patience, and daring. Washington's reputation soared, and the revolution gained a new sense of possibility. But Britain was far from defeated. After leaving Boston, the British returned with a vengeance. A huge fleet carrying 32,000 troops and battle-hardened Hessian mercenaries arrived in New York in July 1776. Their force easily landed on Staten Island, vastly outnumbering Washington's inexperienced army of 19,000. The trap was set. The Americans were attacked from both front and rear. Their lines collapsed, and the battle turned into a rout. Only a brave stand by a few units in the rear prevented total annihilation. The battle ended in a decisive British victory, with heavy American casualties. Washington's army was cornered at Brooklyn Heights. Surrounded and facing destruction, all hope seemed lost. Yet in one of the most daring episodes of the war, Washington planned a secret nighttime evacuation. Every available boat was assembled, and under cover of fog, his army slipped across the East River. By sunrise, the last soldier had safely crossed. The British were completely taken by surprise. Despite this miraculous escape, Washington's forces endured further defeats, retreating across New Jersey into Pennsylvania. Morale was collapsing, enlistments were expiring, and many doubted the revolution could survive. Yet Washington refused to give up. In the bitter winter of 1776, he struck back.
The Hessian garrison at Trenton was complacent in the belief that no attack was possible during the holiday season and in such terrible weather was caught off guard. The subsequent march was grueling, with men trudging through snow and ice, many leaving bloody footprints. But the gamble paid off. The attack on Trenton was a complete surprise. Nearly 1,000 Hessians were captured, with minimal American losses. Days later, Washington outmaneuvered Cornwallis, slipping away at night to strike Princeton. Another American victory followed. These successes, though modest in scale, reinvigorated the cause and proved that the Revolution could endure. By 1777, Britain sought to crush the rebellion by isolating New England through a three-pronged invasion of New York. The main attack, commanded by General John Burgoyne, advanced from Canada. Yet, coordination between the British columns failed. Burgoyne's army pushed deep into hostile territory, isolated and vulnerable. At Saratoga, the Americans seized their chance. The first clash, Freeman's Farm, was brutal. Weeks later, at Bemis Heights, American forces decisively defeated Burgoyne. Surrounded, short of supplies, and with no relief in sight, Burgoyne surrendered. Saratoga was the turning point. France, long resentful of Britain, now saw that the American cause was viable. The French foreign minister, Vergennes, had been secretly supplying the rebels since 1776, but the victory convinced him to act openly. In 1778, France formally recognized the United States and signed the Treaty of Alliance. Soon, Spain joined, followed by the Dutch Republic, transforming the colonial rebellion into a global war. The entry of these powers changed everything. French financial aid, weapons, and soldiers proved invaluable. Most importantly, the French Navy challenged Britain's supremacy at sea. Spanish campaigns in Europe and the Americas stretched British resources thin, while Dutch merchants funneled vital supplies to the Americans. Britain, once the unrivaled empire, now found itself fighting a war on multiple continents. In 1781, the decisive blow came at Yorktown. Cornwallis fortified his army on the Virginia coast, hoping for naval support. Instead, the French fleet under Admiral de Grasse defeated the British Navy at the Battle of the Chesapeake. The trap was sealed. On land, Washington and his French ally Rochambeau besieged Yorktown. Allied artillery pounded the British positions day and night. The bombardment was so intense, it even set the British ship HMS Caron aflame. With ammunition running out, disease spreading, and escape impossible, Cornwallis surrendered. Yorktown broke Britain's will to continue. Peace negotiations began in Paris, culminating in the Treaty of Paris, signed on September 3, 1783. Britain formally recognized the United States as free, sovereign, and independent states. The treaty granted generous territorial boundaries, enabling American expansion westward. The American Revolutionary War succeeded in creating the first independent nation in the Americas. Its significance, however, extended far beyond. The Revolution inspired democratic and revolutionary movements around the world, most famously the French Revolution of 1789. Ideas of liberty, self-government, and popular sovereignty spread like wildfire, challenging monarchies and empires everywhere. Ironically, France's role in supporting the Americans contributed to its own fiscal crisis, hastening the downfall of the Bourbon monarchy. The American experiment demonstrated that ordinary people could overthrow an empire, resist tyranny, and create a republic founded on principles of liberty and representation. It showed that governments need not be imposed from above by kings and parliaments across the ocean, but could be formed from below by citizens determined to govern themselves. For millions around the world, this was not just a political event, but a revelation. The idea that common farmers, artisans, and merchants could stand against the world's most powerful empire and prevail. Yet the new nation struggled with contradictions, most glaringly the persistence of slavery, which cast a deep shadow over the promise of liberty. The revolution's ideals of freedom and equality existed uneasily alongside the brutal reality of bondage. Women, too, found themselves excluded from the political rights they had helped to secure. Native peoples, whose lands became the frontier of American expansion, bore the cost of this new republic's growth. These tensions did not erase the achievements of independence, but they made clear that the American Revolution was only the beginning of a longer struggle to live up to its own ideals. Still, the power of the example could not be denied. By successfully proving that a people could chart their own destiny, the revolution reshaped global politics. Monarchies and empires that seemed eternal suddenly appeared vulnerable. Philosophers, revolutionaries, and reformers across Europe, Latin America, and beyond looked to the American model as proof that entrenched systems of power could be challenged. For the French, the revolution across the Atlantic was both an inspiration and a warning. Liberty carried costs, but it also carried the promise of rebirth. In the decades that followed, the American Revolution echoed in the uprisings of Haiti, in the wars of independence in South America, and in reform movements throughout Europe. Even when imperfectly realized, the principles of popular sovereignty, representative government, and human liberty became aspirations that could not be silenced. The Republic born in 1776 became a beacon, its contradictions acknowledged, but its message enduring, that freedom was not the privilege of a few, but the right of all.